So how do you know whether or not you need to hire an attorney after a car accident or not? It's something that a lot of people wonder. Sometimes people do, and sometimes they don't. And it really depends on what's going on with your crash. There are a couple questions that you can ask yourself to help get that figured out and get you the right answer. The first question to ask yourself is, were you at fault for the accident? If you were at fault for the accident, you're still going to have problems to deal with, damaged vehicle, maybe you're hurt, but the type of insurance claims that are available to you to try to get those problems solved are a little bit less when you're at fault. So there's really two problems that might face you when you're at fault for the accident, and that's getting the car fixed and maybe dealing with some injuries. To get your car fixed, you obviously have to go through your own auto insurance because the accident was your fault. You don't have the ability to go through the other auto insurance. That claim is going to be governed under the collision coverage on your own vehicle, so hopefully you have full coverage, as people call it, which typically means collision and comprehensive coverage on our own vehicles for damage that happens, whether we're at fault or not. When you make your property damage claim through your own policy, the way the claim is governed is governed by what the policy says. So maybe you don't have the coverage at all. Maybe you have a high deductible. Maybe you get rental car coverage and maybe you don't. It's all governed by what type of insurance you pay for. And so it's always smart to make sure that you have good insurance coverage in place so you know what options are available. The second thing you might have to deal with, whether you're at fault or not, that you also won't need an attorney for, is if you're hurting at all, you do have access to make what's called a personal injury protection claim or a PIP claim. So under Utah law, we require that all of our drivers carry at least $3,000 of what's called PIP coverage. And what that is, in some states it's called MedPay, but PIP is a kind of a specific Utah thing that dictates you got to have at least $3,000 of coverage available for medical bills after a crash, no matter who's at fault. So even if I run a stop sign or I rear end somebody and the accident's my fault, I mean we all make mistakes while driving from time to time, I then still have the ability to have at least a little bit of coverage available, to pay for my ambulance ride or pay for an ER bill or cover some chiropractic or physical therapy care. It's typically people have only the $3,000 that's required and not much more, because oftentimes we're not even aware that we have PIP or what it is or how it works. But either way, if you're at fault for a crash, you're not going to need to hire an attorney. You can make a PIP claim. You can make a property damage claim on your own insurance, and that would kind of be the end of the road as far as options that you have available to you. If the other driver, if you'd hit somebody, damage their car or hurt them, they may have insurance claims against your insurance. But in those situations, your insurance steps in and would pay to either resolve their claims or pay to hire an attorney for you. Either way, you're not going to have to go out and find your own attorney to help you out with additional insurance claims if you were at fault or the one that made the mistake that caused the crash. The second question to ask yourself when you're trying to figure out whether or not you should hire an attorney after a car accident is, are you feeling any pain at all? Were you hurt in any way? This can make the answer pretty clear, because if you are not at fault and you are feeling pain, odds are you have the type of insurance claims available to you where the difference between the claim going the right way and the claim going the wrong way becomes pretty vast. And that means that hiring an attorney, somebody who deals with those type of insurance claims every single day, could make potentially a huge difference for you. Where if you're not hurt at all, you're not in any pain, little fender benders happen all the time, where you really probably don't need an attorney. Let's say you only have property damage issues to deal with, you're not hurt at all. Sometimes a call to an attorney to get some advice could go a long way, but to actually hire one, it's unlikely. The type of things that you're going to be dealing with when you're not at fault and you're dealing with your own property damage is that you now have the ability to make the insurance claim on the other drivers, on their car insurance instead of your own. And the claims work similarly as if you got your car fixed by your own insurance, but not quite the same. Because when you make a claim through the other person's coverage, the way that claim is governed is not governed by your policy, because you don't have a policy with them. It's Utah civil law that dictates how that relationship will work and what they will cover and what they won't. And there's a few advantages to you by going through the at-fault insurance when that option's available. One is, because it's not governed by what your policy says, we know you have rental car coverage essentially, because you have what's called loss of use damages, where that other driver's insurance will need to cover the price of a rental car for you while they've taken your car away. Essentially the law says, look, they're supposed to make it like it never happened to your car. It's supposed to cover all the things to where, we don't have a time machine to undo it. And so all that Utah law can do for you is say, okay, well, financially then let's try to time machine this person and just make it like it never happened. Civil law is not focused at all on punishing anybody. So nothing that you do and those type of claims or hiring an attorney there is not meant to punish the driver that made the mistake. There's no criminal law involved. It's just about solving your issues. So you can then get a rental car, and you'd get your car either fixed or totaled just like you would with if you went through your own insurance. But there is one other advantage to going through the other insurance when you're not at fault, and that is that they'll cover your diminished value of your vehicle. So if your vehicle gets dinged up in a crash, take it in, you get it fixed on your Carfax now, your vehicle history, it shows that you had this big repair, and arguably you're going to lose some resale value on that when you eventually go to sell that vehicle. Well, that's an unrealized loss until you do sell the vehicle, but your vehicle has decreased in value. And so when you go through your own policy, that's not owed to you under the language of your own policy. But when you go through the at-fault auto insurance, they actually do need to cover that. And that's not something that they love to come up with and volunteer, but they do owe that under Utah law, and you would be able to get it compensated. The way that you really know whether or not you need an attorney after a crash is if you're hurting, because that's a much more complicated issue to deal with. If you are hurt in any way after a crash, the primary goal is you want to get back to good as new, full health, like the crash never happened at all. And in order to do that, you want to get proper medical care, the best medical care available. And you still would have access to your PIP claim for the first $3,000, and you'd still have access to health insurance if you have that. But you would also have access to what's called attorney liens if you were to hire an attorney to help you after a crash where you're not at fault. And essentially what that does is gives you the ability to get whatever medical is best for you, see whatever type of providers are best in order to get you back to full health without having to worry about coming out of pocket in the meantime. The medical providers then are agreeing that, hey, eventually, the insurance that's at fault is going to be covering everything, and so we're not going to make you cash pay as you go, which sometimes can be a big burden because medical care can get expensive. And what we don't want is people having to shortchange their medical care and not heal fully after a crash, because then the worst thing that could happen is you're sitting on a couch somewhere 5 years from now and saying, well, my neck's never been quite the same. It's not that big of a deal, but it's not, it's never been the same since I was in that accident years ago. That's what we don't want. You want to make sure that you can heal fully and properly, and you want to be able to see, whatever medical providers are best in order to get you back to full health. The biggest difference that an attorney will make after a car accident is the way that then those claims are valued. So just like if your car gets damaged and the at-fault insurance has to cover, an amount of money to try to time machine you to make it like it never happened to your car. Well, the reason why you probably don't need an attorney there is because the difference between paying you fairly for your car and paying you not fairly for your car is small. It's a car. You can look it up online. There's not going to be a huge range of figuring out what that is worth. But when you're hurt, Utah civil law would also say, okay, well then the at-fault insurance needs to pay you an amount of money to make it like it never happened to you. You're a human being with a life, and you only get the two knees, and they've got to last you a long time. And so when you get hurt in any way in a car accident, it becomes a much bigger deal to figure out what amount is fair, and a much wider range of what might be fair to time machine you, essentially to pay you to make you go, it's like it never happened. And that's a weird concept for people, but it's the only way that we have to try to right these wrongs, because punishing the driver who ran the stop sign doesn't help you. So Utah law just makes us all carry insurance so that we can try to get people paid fairly and make these problems go away when that happens. Insurance companies, they have adjusters and they have attorneys, and they're really good at their job. And after a car accident, their job is to, the less money that they're able to pay you, the more money that they're able to save for their own company. So that's their job. Their interests are now directly against you. And it's not because they're bad folks. They're probably a lot nicer guy than I am. It's just their financial interests are directly against you. And so the way that they are able to minimize or get out of covering certain things is really three issues. So one would be liability. The easiest way to get out of them having to cover stuff for you after your accident would be to say, well, it wasn't even our fault or our driver's fault, so we don't have to cover anything. The second way would be causation, which means if they can't show that the crash wasn't their fault, their next play would be, okay, the crash was totally our fault, we want to make it right, we want to make it like it never happened. but you know, and we know that it, you know, hurt your back, but your knee is not from the crash. That was probably from, you know, we know you play volleyball sometimes with your friends or whatever it might be. That, you know, look for ways to not have to cover certain parts of what might have happened to you from the crash. And the last thing is the human element, or people call it pain and suffering. And what pain and suffering really is, it gets a bad rap. It sounds, you know, these crazy, greedy lawyers, you know, and their pain and suffering stuff. What pain and suffering really means is that in order to time machine you after a crash, you wouldn't go back in time and be sitting in your car waiting to get rear-ended and call the person that's about to rear-end you and say, hey, go ahead and hit me so long as you agree to pay my doctors to fix me. That's not an even trade. You would never take that deal. Pain and suffering is to compensate you for the difference. So the human impact. How much physical pain did it cause? How did that pain impact your life? How long did it take to get back to normal? Did you fully recover, or are there things that linger? And unfortunately, sometimes people get hurt in a way where, you know, my arm was never quite the same. And that's why the value of what it might take for an insurance company to pay you ranges so widely. You know, you hear on TV somebody got $1 million. You never want to be that person. What that means is, you know, something horrible happened to where even $1 million wasn't enough to time machine them to make it right, like it never happened. As you can imagine, like if somebody lost an arm in a crash, they would say, well, geez, even $1 million, I don't want that deal. I'd way rather go back in time and have my arm. But there's also claims on the other side of that spectrum where maybe you get rear-ended and you've got some neck pain and some headaches and whatever, but within a few weeks it just fully resolves. You know, you take a baby aspirin and, you know, maybe $200 is fair for what happened to you. It totally depends on how it impacts you. But one thing that an attorney can make the biggest difference for you is that human element. You know, an insurance company, when they punch into their software, you know, maybe you got hit in a crash on your way to your daughter's dance recital and you missed it. To a calculator, that's worth zero, right? Our job as an injury attorney is to, you know, get an insurance company to value you like a human being with a life. Because to you, missing your daughter's dance recital was a big deal. Or maybe you had a family vacation plan that you'd had planned for years, and you go and you're still able to do it, but you were in pain the whole time and uncomfortable and weren't able to participate in some of the activities. You know, to just a calculator, you know, or a computer software, that's not a big deal, but in your life that can make a big impact. And so an attorney's job is to, you know, represent you in that insurance claim to make sure that the things that specifically happened to you and how it affected your life are valued fairly. So the last thing that's super important to remember when you're trying to figure out whether or not you should hire an attorney after your car accident or not is that either way, whether you hire an attorney or not, you're still just making an insurance claim. It's extraordinarily unlikely that you're ever going to have to file a lawsuit or go after this person individually. You're never going to take one penny out of their own pocket. Your claims are against their insurance company either way, with or without an attorney. It's just with an attorney, the idea is that we get the insurance claim to be handled the right way for you.